Noni Madueke to Arsenal. Here we go. £50 million, a 5-year deal from Chelsea to Arsenal, their city rivals. I mean, a really interesting transfer, not one that many would have had on their cards going into this transfer window. And given the fact that Arsenal have needed to get attacking reinforcements, it's a really interesting one to evaluate. I just wanted to hop into my studio and give my immediate reaction, analysis, insight into what this move means for Arsenal, how he might be best utilised, and is it a sensible allocation of those funds at this point in the transfer window. I've seen a lot of the fan reaction online from Arsenal fans, and Arsenal fans in general, in my opinion, have been probably too critical about the move. They've been very sort of against it. I think I've seen a petition online, 2,000 or so signatures going against the signing of Madueke and kind of, very verbally disagreeing with Arsenal wanting to sign him. That's not going to get the best out of a really young, bright and exciting English attacker, in my opinion. That's obviously a little preview of what I think about Madueke, but we'll get into how Arsenal can use him in general. Look, Arsenal are a team that have needed attacking reinforcements this season for sure. Last season, when they had Havertz in the side, although he was their top scorer, look, he wasn't that clinical number 9. And not only that, Arsenal have had some flaws in their game model for the last couple of seasons. I think the 22-23 season was my favourite version of that Arteta Arsenal side so far, and then obviously because that was probably too prone to being pulled apart in 1v1 attacking situations, namely Zinchenko, I think probably encapsulates that kind of team in general, that amazing fluid attacking quality, but also that probably slightly too weak defensive quality, particularly in transition situations. That was scrapped and they went a little bit more pragmatic, a lot more safe. You had a really strong physical midfield in there and an attacking line that perhaps weren't as risk-taking as in prior seasons, but still could probably force the issue generally in most games. It meant that they drew a lot of games, didn't win every game, but they were really hard to break down and they didn't really lose games either. We saw how those two versions of Arsenal's teams have changed. Now, I think Arsenal need to, reel it back a little bit and find that creative edge and find that transitional attacking quality that they've lacked last season. They had a really good, strong base, a really good defensive and pragmatic system, good, set piece quality, but the two kind of areas that they struggled with, in my opinion, was one, attacking in transition. They didn't really have the players or the speed to do so. Martinelli at times can do that, but was often left hugging the touchline. And then Declan Rice can carry in big spaces, but then beyond that, you had a Kai Havertz who, if he does get the ball running in behind, he can put it away, but he's not the fastest of players. He's more of a hold-up player when you do go long into him. And then Bukayo Saka, who, again, if he does get the chance to put it away, can do, but he's not the most quick attacker in those situations. And he kind of likes playing at a little bit of a slower pace, drawing players in and then bursting past them in sort of these feint-like motions. Odegaard, again, he's more of a risk-averse player, in my opinion. Whenever he has had the chance to kind of play that direct pass in transition situations, he often opts for a more safer pass or hold onto the ball a little bit longer. They retain possession and then he's set up in that same system of trying to break down a team that sit on the edge of their own box. So you need attacking quality and you need quality to attack in the transitions with pace. And I think a lot of the signings that Arsenal have been linked to, and with Madueke signing, they are players who attack big spaces really well. Chelsea, I think, moved towards a slower style of play towards the end of last season, and Madueke's, influence in that style probably waned a little bit. But in the first half of the season, when they were playing a little bit more end-to-end, almost like the sort of end parts of Pochettino's reign, still being embedded in parts of Maresca's system, in those really sort of transitional situations, Madueke gets the ball and he drives it incredibly well. Over big distances, he draws players in and he runs past them and he can beat 3 or 4 men starting from his own box all the way to the opposition's box themselves. He's a brilliant carrier. He's namely a right winger, in my opinion. I know people have said he can play on the left wing, and I've seen a few games and clips. There's not a huge sample size. He's done a bit for the England under-21s. He's done a little bit for Chelsea at the back end of last season. And he can do it. He can do it. I'm not saying he can't, but I wouldn't necessarily use him there as a player who can maximise his quality there. I think he's a player who gives you an option there, which is good. Versatility is always important when you've got injuries or when you want to kind of shake things up and have a new solution. I think one thing that makes sense about him as a left winger, and there's not too many things that I would prefer him on the left to the right for, but as a left winger, he is left-footed, and Arsenal don't really have that kind of option. They have Martinelli, and they've got Trossard, who looks to be leaving, but both of those players are right-footed. They like to get closer to the box, and even if Arteta does put them towards the touchline, when they do hit the byline and try and make a cross, they're always crossing that with their weak foot. And with that traditional width option that Madueke can offer, it will be good to see in situations as a tactical solution to get to the byline and play that left-footed cross often to perhaps the back post, where you might see a late arriving Kai Havertz at the back post, for example. I think that's a really smart and really sensible option to have, that left-footed left winger. Manchester City do at times with Savinho actually moving over there, even though he's normally a right winger. So I think that's a sensible option as a left winger. Madueke likes to come inside anyway, and he uses these sort of feints. He dribbles with both feet, but he likes to kind of move inside even off of that left. But if we focus on his right-sided quality, look, I've mentioned already that he offers the ability to carry from deep, and he plays at a higher pace than Bukayo Saka does, who in those situations, although he can carry, wouldn't do it with that speed and with that pace. So that obviously gives Arsenal a clear option, especially in latter parts of the game when you're winning, perhaps to see out games, and then with that attacking quality on top of an incredible defensive shape. By the way, I've said for months now that Arsenal's defensive structure and defensive personnel in a low set defence is second to none. How hard is it to break down a back four of Miles Lewis-Skelly, Gabriel, Saliba, and a Timber or a Ben White in your back four? These are incredible defensive profiles, and not only that, but in front of that back four, you've got, in my opinion, the best defensive midfielder. So the best defensive midfielder out of possession, sitting at the edge of his box. The way he shuttles, the way he blocks, when players are trying to take long distance shots, he's incredible. Declan Rice, actually I think about that performance against Manchester City, that 10-men performance of Arsenal behind the ball, all 10 men, putting in a shift for an entire half, and Manchester City could barely get anything. It required a set piece in the end for us to score against that Arsenal side. But if they can defend that astutely with 10 men, imagine with 11 men, and imagine you've got now transitional or counter-attacking quality in the likes of Madueke seeing out a game, hitting those big spaces, and then now having a number 9 who can follow up those counter-attacking movements. It makes a lot of sense, in my opinion, from that front. I know a lot of people are going to look at that £50 million transfer fee and be startled and be worried, and I can kind of understand those worries. I suppose how I would look at it is, for £50 million, for a 5-year deal, for a very young, homegrown talent who can technically play both sides, but generally plays your right wing position, it's essentially sort of a £10 million buy for each season for 5 years, with massive upside in how good he can be. He gives you the chance to actually rest Bukayo Saka, which hasn't been done for years. Bukayo Saka is already a world-class player. Bukayo Saka with rest in his legs, with minutes to play towards the end of the season, will finally have that ability to, in my opinion, showcase his top level quality for the entirety of the season. We know in the run-in he perhaps dropped slightly off that incredible level that we know he can play at. So even if it's just so he can play 500 to 800 minutes less of that campaign, and at the end of the season he's playing a little bit better in those final few games, I think it's worth it to try and push that Arsenal side over the edge in trying to win a title. I think that's a really smart thing that Arsenal can look to do. As well as that, I think Madueke has the potential to scale up as a brilliant goal-scoring winger off that right by himself, irrespective of Bukayo Saka. And I've always said Bukayo Saka is somebody who will be really impressive and perhaps more dangerous playing in central areas. It gives you that option. I don't know if Arteta will use it next season, but it does give you the option to play Saka more inside and Madueke towards the wings. He had the most shots per 90 minutes for wingers in the Premier League. He gets towards the goal. He takes shots early. His shot volume is really impressive. And that's something that I've been, slightly critical for Martinelli about, because he doesn't get his shots off early enough. He doesn't get enough shots away. He doesn't force the issue enough. And Arsenal at times don't force the issue enough. They're a bit too safe. They're slightly too predictable. And by being able to manufacture so many shooting opportunities, you're forcing the issue. You're forcing rebounds. You're putting the opposition team deeper, under more pressure. And I think it's always a good quality to have your wingers up their shot value and have not bad greediness, but have good greediness in your wingers and your attackers, because you need to get goals. You can't be relying solely on Havertz for the goals and relying solely on Saka for the creativity. And Madueke can kind of provide you a bit of both, as well as providing you rest and rotation for your right winger, left winger, and he gives you that transitional quality and pace, and he's a homegrown player. Look, if you think about all of those things together, and then you take into the fact that he's Premier League sort of proven, he knows the city, he understands the language and the culture, he's not going to be homesick. These are all things that minimize the chance of a transfer being a dud. So it is a lot of money. It only makes sense if they do kind of put more money into a number 9, in my opinion. But he gives you versatility and he gives you all of these other qualities that I've just mentioned. In terms of the negatives, like there will be some negatives. All players have some negatives. He is a player who has had a questionable injury record, in my opinion. Well, not in my opinion, is the facts show it. Especially at PSV, he was fairly injury prone, and a few muscle injuries as well. I think, given the fact that he'll be a rotational player, given the fact that his injury record last season was generally okay as well, hopefully that won't be an issue. You wouldn't want your rotation and alternative attacker to be somebody who is injury prone, because you want them to obviously prevent your main attackers almost from being injury prone. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. And the second thing is, obviously, against a real stubborn low set defense, he's perhaps not the best suited to maximizing his qualities, but I think that can be nurtured and refined, because I mean, there's quotes from his one-to-one coaches that he's one of the best learners. He's very sort of humble about learning and immersing himself in knowledge and continually improving. And I think that quality in and of itself is something that Arteta will be really pleased with. I'll be really interested to see how he does utilize him, because it opens up huge possibilities tactically, system-wise, and obviously it allows the other attackers to kind of get a bit of rest. And also some competition. It's always good to have some competition. As good as Saka is, knowing that, you know, there's another England international level player behind him ready to, you know, chomp at the bit and try and get minutes himself. It will give him a bit of fire and a bit of edge, particularly I think in those 50-50 games, knowing that, look, he doesn't want to get replaced because that's his team. Arsenal is Saka's team, and he will have that kind of sense of ego to want to keep that position as his. The last thing I'll mention is there's been some quotes and things about his personality. He doesn't work hard. I don't know if that's true, because I've not seen him in training. I've not worked with him, anything like that. But the part that I've seen is how he works in games, and I think he does press and he pounces on opportunities to press. Chelsea in general haven't been the most coordinated of high pressing sides through Maresca's tenure initially. I think that's changing a little bit, but there's still big spaces that they have to jump, as we've seen in the Club World Cup. But Madueke in general, I think, will benefit from this Arsenal side. I don't think he won't press if he's asked to, and if the rest of the team are pressing in a really intense, coordinated fashion. I think that will actually elevate his ability to press and work hard out of possession. I've seen him actually defend in a back five almost as a wing back in games where, you know, they've been penned in as well. So I don't think he has the ego, rather, to not try and defend. I think he is willing to do that for the team. So generally, look, I think he's an incredible player, huge upside, slightly risky buy given his injury record and the fact that he's probably not going to be a starter immediately and there's a big fee around him. I am completely aware of that. But if he plays often, if he's sort of a mainstay, a second choice attacker across the front line, if he can free up and improve Bukayo Saka's performance across the season, and he has the potential to be a really impressive player, I think he will explode and be sort of starter quality, if not this season, in seasons to come. So you've also got that upside as well there. But in general, I'm a really big fan of Madueke. I know my video might be different to what Arsenal fans might be telling you, but hopefully my analysis of his qualities is relatively objective and kind of highlights a little bit about how he might be used by Arteta in the coming season. They need more players, but if this is one piece of their strategy, then I'm really happy for Arsenal. Noni Madueke, here we go to Arsenal. It'll be an exciting season to see how it pans out.